So we're going to move on to task number 6, which involves creating some indices on the various tables. And you're going to do this if you want queries to run faster. And you typically create an index on a column that's heavily used in queries. So the database that we are going to be accessing is AP. And I've got one index I'm going to create on my invoices table and vendor ID column. And I'm calling it IX for index _ vendor ID. And then the other one I'm going to also do on invoices. And it's going to have invoice date in descending order and invoice total. So that index is going to be on 2 columns. So I'm going to go ahead and create this by hitting execute. And for some reason, which is really beyond me, when I run this sometimes, it thinks I'm trying to run a stored procedure, which is just strange. So you may have to run this a couple times. This is very odd. It should not confuse an index with a stored procedure. And it should say it ran successfully. Okay, and what you may end up having to do is copy and paste the code into here to get it to work. I've never had a problem with it working before, so that was a little strange, but you should end up with 2 indices. Okay, one for vendor ID, and the other one for invoice date and invoice total. So I'm going to comment these out. And we are going to create another index based on last name in our rep table. So now we're going to switch databases again. And we're going over to test AP. And I'm going to say create index. And I'm going to call it IDX, which is another naming convention. So it's either IX or IDX. And it's going to be on reps and on my last name column. Let me hope that it doesn't think it's a stored procedure. All right, so that one worked, yay. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. And we're going to do another one on our customer table based on last name and first name. This is going to be very similar to the one that we did on invoice date and invoice total. So this is on the customer table. Okay, so we're still in test AP. So we don't have to tell it to use test AP because we're still in it. And so we're going to say create index, and we're going to use the IDX naming convention. And I think I'm going to call it probably just name, since I'm using last name and first name. And then I'm going to say on, and it's going to be on customers. Oops, if you spell it correct. And then the columns that I am using are last name and first name. Okay, now I'm going to just double check, make sure I got my column names right. Last name and first name and customers. All right, so I'm going to run this. Yay. All right, so that one worked too. And we're moving right along here. Our boss wants a filtered index for invoice date and invoice total in the AP database. Now we're going to bounce back up to AP. And so we're going to say use AP. And we're going to create an index And this one, let's see what they wanted it on. Invoice date and invoice total. All right, so we're going to call it IDX, invoice date filter. And it's going to be on invoices. And then the columns that we wanted for this was invoice date. Whoops. And that'll be in descending order, and invoice total. And the reason this is filtered is because we're going to add a where to it. So we're going to say where invoice date. And let's see. Invoice date needs to be greater than 2016-02-01. Now there is a feature that we could have used that would actually help us out with this. And I'm going to show you it really quick because you may prefer it. If we right click, we can use what's called a snippet. And let me see where it is. Insert snippet. And then we just have to kind of pick which snippet we want. And we want to create, let's see, probably just a basic one here. And then it kind of puts in some, basically a template that then we can go in and change and customize. You can do snippets for basically anything. Okay? So if you have trouble remembering some of these commands and you don't want to look it up, the snippets do come in handy. Okay? But now I have this new index here, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. And it did complete successfully. So I'm going to comment that out. And at this point, I am done with this task.